Hello and welcome to the Northern Souls podcast. I'm your host Zeke, and today I am joined by my lovely wife Keagan.
Hi, I'm Keagan.
And the purpose of this podcast will be to discuss, explore, and educate others on Norse paganism. Ultimately, our goal is to find the good life.
Oh yeah.
So, in the last episode, we kind of at the end started to briefly touch on hardship. We were just talking about how, 2020 was a bad year for everybody and bad things happened. And we kind of want to talk about, like, how to deal with hardship from a Norse pagan point of view.
Yeah, so 2020 was, it started off as any kind of normal year for us. Like, we had our own place.
Yep.
We both had our jobs.
Yep.
You just started a new job in March.
Yes. Yeah.
And everything was looking up, and then found out in February that I was pregnant. February 2020. You also got your car stolen.
Yeah, I got my car stolen. Totally random.
Literally,
Anyways.
his car got stolen, and then a day later we found out we were pregnant, so it was like, whatever. We didn't really care.
Yeah.
And, and then March 2020 happened, and so many things happened in that month.
Right, back to back to back to back.
Yeah. When I was 6 weeks along, I went to the ER because I was spotting.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what spotting is, it's bleeding. And went to the ER, and they basically told me baby's fine, baby's healthy, nothing to worry about. And I ended up getting, like, mild pregnancy symptoms, but they were there.
Mm-hmm.
And then March 2020, we found out that, you keep hearing a little bit about COVID.
Yeah.
In the background. And then we found out that my grandma, who was in a nursing home on the East Coast, she was getting locked there, like doing a lockdown. And then literally 2 days after I heard about that, she died.
Right, yeah.
They found her literally passed out on her floor in her room and took her to the ER, and she passed away in the ER due to complications from COVID, which was really hard on my family, especially my dad, because that was his mom. Mm-hmm. And then in the middle of March, we went in for my first ultrasound for the 12-week ultrasound.
Yep.
And I took my mom and Zeke with me, and the doctor told me that the baby's heart stopped beating. What was weird is because it was my 12-week ultrasound, they said baby stopped growing around a little bit before 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And I was still having every symptom of pregnancy. Yep. So, like, my body didn't even know I wasn't pregnant anymore.
Well, yeah, and, like, weren't you, even after, we found out that you were miscarrying and they had miscarriage, I'm
right.
Sorry, I don't know this part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Through medication.
Even after you immediately started taking the medication, like, wasn't it, like, another 2 weeks before you stopped?
Yeah, before I actually stopped having pregnancy symptoms.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's crushing because it's like the entire time, like, you're kind of kicking yourself, saying, why isn't my body figuring this out? And then, of course, you end up calling question to the gods, in a way.
Yeah. Well, because, like, I remember, too, walking out of the hospital, like, dude, I went through, like, the typical, 5 stages of grief. Boom, 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 boom. Like, at first, when the doctor was talking, I was like, bullshit. Second opinion. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And then I became angry.
Very. Not at me.
Not at you, but, like, I was angry at the gods. I was cursing their names, doing stuff that I never thought I would do, because I was like, how can you do this to me? I've always lived my life honorably and with courage, and how could you do this to me? How could you treat me like this? It's just lashing out. Yeah, and what sucked even more is, like, we had already announced to all our family members too. Yeah. So then we had to call people up and go, JK.
Yeah, literally, we decided to tell all our friends and family on that Thursday, and the ultrasound was on Friday.
Yeah.
But, so the whole thing was, it's like you were angry, and I think part of the reason why we were angry is because we had what we thought we determined as a good rune casting about it, if you remember.
Well, yeah, because like technically that wasn't your first miscarriage. Like the first one, wasn't it? Like technically,
It was just a chemical pregnancy that basically just means like my body thought it was pregnant, but it actually wasn't.
Right, and based on a rune casting, that was before that chemical pregnancy. What it looked like it was telling me was that Keagan would initially miscarry, but then we'll have a baby. So, that second time around, I was convinced. I was like, oh yeah, this is the one. This is gonna happen. Everything's working out. Everything's going good. So yeah, to get that news, it was pretty crushing.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my mom about it all, and it's crappy news. That's never good stuff to deliver.
Right.
But I remember her saying that she didn't put it as eloquently, but she tries, and that's why I love my mom. That basically, like, those kinds of miscarriages happen sometime because there's a glitch in the matrix or whatever, that would have been something wrong with the baby if it had been born.
Right.
And at the time, it wasn't really helpful.
No.
For me, because like the feelings were still too fresh. Yeah, and it wasn't until like 3 weeks later. Actually, 3 weeks later, then the pandemic was in full swing.
Lockdown.
And I lost my job.
Your job.
Yeah, I lost my job. And I was like, great. So now I got this to look forward to as well. And then I remember like a week after I lost my job, so like probably 4 weeks after the miscarriage, like, there was this one time I was driving to the post office to get the mail. And like, I've never had like a god or goddess speak to me. Like, I don't hear a voice going, Zeke, Zeke. Like, I don't hear that. But it was more like a feeling, and it felt like Freya was just saying, I know this was hard, and I know this seems like a cruelty, like we did you wrong, but in the end, it was a kindness, because that baby wouldn't have been healthy. It would have been stillborn, right, or would have lived for a week, and then failure to thrive would have died.
Well, and even if the baby was totally completely healthy, we would not have had the money to take care of it on our own.
Right.
Like, we definitely wouldn't have been. We would have been trapped with our parents, which was its own struggle in itself.
Right.
But anyway, so that's how 2020 began.
Yeah.
It's like we had a death in the family, and then we had the miscarriage, and then we had your job loss, and then a loss of our home, basically, because we had to suck it up and ask for help.
Yeah.
And the good thing through it all is I didn't lose my job.
Right.
It was because it was deemed essential, so that was its own kind of blessing in disguise. And as much as I wanted a break because it was super stressful, but, and 2020 was just awful.
Yeah.
And it took me 3 months before my body was actually relatively back to normal. But it took a long time, and it's like I felt like I was kind of abandoned.
Yeah.
Because how, like, previously, for me, when I thought I was a Christian, like, I could always lean back on my faith and could always pray and do all that stuff. And it's like, well, now I'm not Christian anymore, and I don't know these gods and goddesses all that well. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, but how could this have happened?
Right.
And I just felt kind of lost. And then I found what helped me was really digging into like lighting candles for the goddesses, mm-hmm, like making sure that they were honored, and just asking for help, basically. And not necessarily like physical, like tangible help, but just like something to help my heart, because I needed that.
Yeah. And
as time goes on, it helps.
Yeah. And like, it's not the same for every person. Kind of like for me, helping me with getting over the miscarriage. It was just that one moment, when I was driving to the post office, and for you it was a little bit different, but that's what I kind of wanted to talk about. I just wanted to provide an example so we can help other people figure out, what to do when hardship comes, because everybody has their own struggles, everybody has their own problems. And I just wanted to discuss like the strategies or ways to persevere through it. Because I've had a number of other things happen to me that are probably too personal for me to share. And one thing that I would definitely try to counsel people against doing is just running to the gods whenever things start getting difficult,
right,
or hard. Like that's for Christians. For us, I believe that we were given our wit and our strength and our intellect by the gods, and I believed if we were given it by the gods, we were given it for a reason, and the reason is to use it. So personally, I try to make sure that I have exhausted those resources before I go to the gods. I also lean on my community. I ask people for advice sometimes if I'm just drawing a blank. And I also wanted to say another reason why I think you should rely on your own wit is that I believe that our ancestors speak to us if you're quiet enough and you listen enough and you're in touch with them enough. I think you can hear them and they speak
or
to you.
Or feel them.
Or yeah, exactly. And I think they can help guide you through stuff, maybe protect you from stuff that you don't see coming. But to get back onto the point and when to go to the gods, like there are times when you've exhausted all your resources, you don't have anyone else you can turn to that you haven't already. Then that's when I start going to the gods. Give an offering. Let them know what you're in need of. Set conditions. Like, for example, one time when I was at a total loss of what to do and exhausted my resources, I didn't even pray to any god or goddess in particular. I was just like, hey, anybody who's listening, bad things are happening to me right now. I've got no idea what to do. I know the status quo isn't working out for me or anyone else. If you guys could tell me what to do to figure this out positively, I'll absolutely do it. If you can give it to me in a dream or in some other kind of sign, I'll do whatever I got to do. And that's kind of how I dealt with that one. And lo and behold, they actually did give me a dream, and I parsed it out, figured it out, and went from there. And things are a lot better since then. But I think my point is when you're asking the gods for help, it's, at least I think this, you shouldn't be asking for necessarily specific things. I think you should be, something that's more appropriate would be to ask for guidance. Can you point me in the right direction?
Yeah, is definitely the key.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be like, hey, I need you to do this for me. Because, they'll laugh at you and be like, no, you can do it yourself.
Yeah.
It's more like when you're stuck, or if you're at a fork in the road and you really don't know which way to go. Mm-hmm. Like, that's when I think you should ask for guidance.
Yeah.
For me, there was a lot of causes from 2020 and the beginning of this year too that caused me to pretty much be depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And I not only sought advice through you, with just like, I don't like how this is feeling, I don't really know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you kept on telling me, like, you should probably take some time for yourself.
Yeah.
And go see some help. Because I also did the same thing to him couple months previously.
Yeah.
And because you were feeling trapped, you know, didn't like the situation that you were in. And I was like, you know what? Maybe you should talk to somebody about it.
Yeah.
And you took my advice, but I didn't take my own.
Yeah.
And so Zeke was really worried about me, and I had a dream that was really nice about my family members who passed away, who have been passed away. And it was one of the nicest dreams I had in a very long time, because we were just sitting down at the table and talking to me, and they were like, well, what's going on? And I told my problems, and they were like, well, maybe you should get some help, you know, and keep an open mind and an open heart.
Yeah.
And it's not a dead end, basically. And I took that and I was like, okay, let's figure out what I can do. And it's like, honestly, it's like, it didn't feel like a goofy dream or a silly dream that meant nothing.
Right.
It felt like literally my ancestors were talking to me. And those kind of dreams mean something, and you need to take them to heart, because your ancestors do look after you. They do. And I took that and I kind of like mustered up the courage to like, okay, yep, I'm going to start seeing a therapist. I'm going to start meditating, which I highly recommend. It's very nice. Like you can, something that can help you, you know, just be calm and be comfortable in your own mind and body. And it's like, and then the more and more you work on yourself, the more and more you feel like yourself.
Yeah. And that's what it will say. Like, you know, the phrase, time heals all wounds. Well, I totally disagree with that statement. I think it's not time itself healing things. I will say it does take time, but it also does require action and actively taking steps. And I would like encourage people not to get impatient and understand it can take a while, but as long as you're taking action to heal your wounds, it'll happen. So,
yeah. You basically don't want to just be stuck as a blob doing nothing and changing nothing.
Right, yeah, that's not going to help anybody, which, I mean, it seems obvious when you're just stating it, but, you know, there are a number of people when they get depressed, they just don't do anything.
Right.
Which just makes you more depressed.
Yeah.
And it just becomes this never-ending cycle. And, of course, obviously, don't just take any action, take corrective actions. If you find something isn't working, then don't just keep doing it. Find something else. But yeah, definitely don't just sit around and do nothing. That'll just make everything worse.
Right. And when you're stuck at it, like a thing of like, I just don't know what to do, I do really encourage asking the gods to point you in the right direction, or maybe even your ancestors, because they do look after you. And I find dreams to be very useful and helpful. And even meditating can help quite a bit, as long as you can center yourself and protect yourself, and you're in a good space. You can use that as well.
Yeah, I do want to stress again that even though I do talk up self-reliance a lot, I don't mean to say that, you know, you should be so self-reliant to the point that you never ever ask for help, especially when you need it. And there's no shame in asking for help. There's only shame in trying to get other people to do things for you and you not doing anything. That's the problem. But simply asking for help, asking for a hand up, there's no shame in that. So don't be ashamed to ask.
Well, it's like when we were at our lowest low, like my family did help us out when I asked.
Yeah.
And we still chipped in.
Yeah.
We still cleaned around the house. We still made sure to take after our own things. We paid for our groceries. We still paid for what we could.
Yeah.
Realistically do, until we got on our feet, which my folks really appreciated.
Yeah.
Because most of the time when someone takes advantage of their hospitality, they just do exactly that. Take advantage of their hospitality, don't pay them anything, and just have a place to crash, treat it like a hotel. Well, for us, you know, it's more like what family was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And we We didn't take advantage of them. We needed help, and they helped us
Right.
when we really needed it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that about covers it. What do you think? You got anything else to add?
I mean, I would just stress that again, it's the gods aren't there to hold your hand.
Right.
You know, it's more like if you need guidance, they're there for you. They don't want to see you fail.
Right.
It's like they want you to see you live the good way.
Yeah.
And if they put these obstacles, these terrible things in your way, there's a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's to make you grow stronger and harder.
Yep.
And be able to, take that lesson and move on from it.
Right. Yep. Well, I think that about does it for this episode. If you guys have any questions or comments, please go ahead and leave them down below. And yeah, until next